Hello, welcome to Reach for Healing. I'm Rebecca Harmon, and we're on day 8 of our 40-day abundance journey based on the Abundance book written by John Randolph Price. I'm going to share my screen so we can jump right into the statement, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. My consciousness of the spirit within me as my unlimited source is the divine power to restore the years the locusts have eaten, to make all things new, and to lift me up to the high road of abundant prosperity. This awareness, understanding, and knowledge of spirit appear as every visible form and experience that I could possibly desire. The theme for Statement 8 and Day 8 is restoration. Locust storms have the reputation, well-deserved reputation, of being devastating. When a cloud of locusts or a storm of locusts come to an area, they absolutely eat every piece of vegetation as far as the eye can see. And to farmers and those invested in having some grass and some plants and some food around, it is absolutely devastating. The reference to restoring the years that the locusts have eaten is a strong statement. To come back from a locust infestation, to save a crop, to save the harvest, to save the finances that come from that harvest is a big order. And that is the promise in this Day 8 statement. I'd like to share a brief story with you about how I have seen this in truth play out in my life, not with locusts, but with restoration. When I graduated from high school, I enlisted in the United States Navy and served 6 years on active duty. When I was honorably discharged at the end of that time period, I had 2 small children and a husband. And a few years later, I would find myself a single mother with those same 2 small children. I was not in a position to earn a lot of money. And so I spent a number of my young adult years, when well-enlisted people don't make a lot of money. And I spent the years that I was initially a single mother raising my 2 children with not a lot of money. And so I had a very deep understanding of what lack looked like in terms of dollars and cents. Now, I was fortunate in that I had family backing and a lot of support that way, and the ability to go back to school and get an education. But there were a lot of lean years. And the result of living during lean years is that you don't end up saving a lot of money for your retirement. If you're barely bringing in enough money every payday just to pay the bills, to keep the lights on, to keep food in the house, to keep the roof over everyone's head, you're not thinking about retirement, and very often you don't have enough to save for retirement. So long story short, I was 40 before I had saved a single penny for my retirement. And at that time, I had completed my education. I had really started to turn around things in my life, and I had begun to study spiritual metaphysics. And so the decade of my 40s was a very lucrative decade. And I began to save for my retirement and to experience much more abundance and prosperity in real terms at that point. In my late 40s, close to 50, I was working for a startup. It was a very good job. It was a very nice salary, but it was very unstable. And I was looking at age 50, when you get close to 50, you start looking at what does my retirement portfolio look like? Now, keep in mind, I'd only been contributing for about 10 years. And most people, financial analysts, would hope that they had been contributing since their early to mid-20s. So I realized I wasn't in a really strong place. And I wasn't in a place where I could double or triple what I was saving either. Even though I was saving as more than most people, I still had bills to pay, and my children were at that point a little bit older, but I still had a lot of obligations. And so I began to use the principles that I was learning in spiritual metaphysics to know that the truth of my situation was different than what the facts appeared to be. In other words, I began to know this truth that I'm always provided. And the first thing that happened as I started to put my attention and my knowing on the fact that I'm always provided and all is well, is that my really nice job with the big fat paycheck started getting rocky. That was already unstable, but I had been relatively protected from the instability. But all of a sudden, the foundation under me in this position began to get rocky. And at the same time, a friend of mine, a former colleague, reached out from another organization. Just so happens that the job that they had and thought I might be interested in was very much in alignment with my education and professional history, but it was in an organization where I would take a rather significant salary pay cut. But I was so uncomfortable in my current position. I was so uncomfortable with the instability and very attracted to this other role, which seemed to have more stability, that I left. And I took a $30,000 pay cut. And you might think, who does that when they're worried about saving enough for retirement? Well, I just felt so strongly, without really being able to even explain it, I felt so strongly that I needed to leave that position in the startup and take this other position that I took the $30,000 pay cut. And I had another year and a half that was rather tough. But I got into that organization, and what happened is that organization was a federal job. And in the federal government, they take your military service and they apply it to your time with the federal government. And all of that counts toward your pension. I had never even dreamed of having a pension. I thought that my retirement was pretty much up to me contributing to 401ks. And so here I was, having walked through a number of rocky roads financially, and having walked away from a very lucrative salary, albeit in a fairly unstable situation, to move into a place where not only would I, in a few short years, recover that salary differential, but where I would be compensated with a pension in addition to the ability to save as part of a 401k. My 6 years of military service are now considered part of my tenure and will be calculated into the pension that I will receive when I retire. This is not something that I knew at the time that I applied for that job. It was something that I learned fairly soon after I took the job. But it's a perfect example, I believe, of this concept of spirit providing and restoring the years the locusts had eaten. So for me, this statement 8 speaks very deeply to what I have seen possible when we put our foot on the spiritual path, when we do what Wayne Dyer often described as walk the inspired life. I know that even when it looks impossible, even when it seems that we started too late and that we're too old and that we'll never have time to catch up, I know that things and circumstances and people can shift and show up in our lives to open doors to that point of restoration. And so I wanted to share that story with you and encourage you on as you continue journaling and thinking about the statements in John Randolph Price's Abundance Journey. As one of my earliest teachers always liked to say, this stuff works. I know it does. And if you stick with it, you'll find out that it does as well. I hope you'll stop back tomorrow for day 9. Until then, take care.